Hey, it's Jordan. I am delighted to be joined by Matthew Hoh. He is a Green Party candidate for Senate in North Carolina. And it's really great to interview you specifically at this time. I'm sure you have some thoughts as a U.S. veteran, disabled veteran who actually resigned from your post in Afghanistan on us now having a $800 billion military budget proposal. So we'll get into that. But tell us first about your story. I know you served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and events on the ground very much turned you against these wars and the military industrial complex.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for having me on, Jordan. And yeah, as you said, I'm running for the U.S. Senate here in North Carolina as a Green Party candidate. But I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years, went to the Iraq War twice. By the time I got to Afghanistan in 2009, I had been appointed into the Foreign Service. And at that point, I was morally and intellectually broken. And after getting to Afghanistan, seeing that the war in Afghanistan was no fundamentally different than the war in Iraq, seeing that the Obama administration was no fundamentally different than the Bush administration, seeing that the escalation of the war that was occurring in 2009 was going to be catastrophic for the Afghan people, as well as for just adding, just escalating the war. It wasn't just the idea of adding more U.S. troops. You were escalating the entire war, and that was just going to continue for years. And as we saw what happened over the last 12 years in Afghanistan since my resignation. So at that point, again, morally and intellectually broken, I resigned in protest over the escalation of the war in 2009 and ended up having a lot of cars, kind of Forrest Gump myself into a media celebrity situation. And that led into becoming involved with both the anti-war community, but also to going into the think tank community as well, so having that activist experience, both wearing a suit and tie and heading into Congress in DC to talk about the wars, talk about militarism, but also too working with groups like Veterans for Peace or Code Pink, with my body actually on the line on the street level. And with them, I was able to do work all throughout the country as well as internationally. So I feel like I come to this with a pretty good perspective of both, street level and, the suit and tie DC level. That gives me some awareness of what I'm stepping into, as well as the urgency of why I'm in it.
Right. And, Republicans say they love the troops. Democrats say they love the troops. I'm sure as a Green Party candidate, you've got just an onslaught of positive media coverage or media coverage in general, and are getting a fair shake in this Senate race, correct?
I think we're actually doing a little bit better than a tip, because I have had a lot of media experience. So Great. I have been on local television here in North Carolina because I've previously been on local television here in North Carolina, still getting shut out of stuff, still getting shut out of some lefty podcasts that I have been on as well. Some of the bigger podcast YouTube folks on the left, I've been on their programs in the past, haven't been on. Now, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons for that. So I don't want to just jump into, hey, they're keeping us out kind of thing. But there certainly is a reaction to running as third party, as a Green or as independent, and not taking part in the two-party system. I received a lot of pushback from people that I had worked with in Washington, D.C. for quite a while. People are part of both 501c3s and 501c4s. 501c3s, of course, nonprofit organizations, supposed to be nonpartisan, but anyone who's worked in DC knows that most of the nonprofits in DC tend to fall into one camp or the other. And there's a very real fear among these people. And some of them were quite hostile to me when I announced my campaign in January, that I would be upsetting things personally for them because of connections, right? So that because this guy, now you may not be invited to that DSCC fundraiser or to the DCCC, family cookout or whatever, right? So because that kind of retaliation, as you know, is real. And I also know too, on the media side, that, someone like, myself or independent or a green or a libertarian or whoever goes on to the local television station, let alone one of the major national networks, they get inundated with, the local county Democrats call, the state Democrats call, the national calls. I mean, like, you have that type of pressure that gets put on them. And I actually experienced that firsthand. Jared, I know this from experience, because when I was doing media after I resigned from Afghanistan, United States Central Command under General Petraeus at that time, based down in Florida, they actually hired a strategic communications firm to discredit me, because I was on the Today Show, I had with Judy Woodruff, all kinds of stuff, being interviewed continuously. And what they did was they hired a firm, and this firm played, hardball, as you would expect. And so, I can give you an example. One time I did an interview with Dan Rather, and I'm walking out of the interview, and his producer comes up and say, "Hey, how do you respond to this?" And he shows me a letter that came from the strategic communications firm working on behalf of General Petraeus and his folks, that said basically, look, if Matthew Hoh is the type of person you want to work with, you're not the type of people we want to work with. Basically saying, if you want access to the generals, if you want to talk to General Petraeus, General McChrystal, if you want a helicopter ride in Afghanistan at some point, then don't have this guy on your program. And a month later, when that program with Dan Rather aired, I was nowhere to be seen. But Dan Rather's person was flying around in a helicopter with Stanley McChrystal. So,
they never aired your interview.
No, they never did. And they brought me up from DC, up to New York, met up with them, the whole crew in a hotel. Right. About 2.5 hours of interview. We're walking outside in Midtown Manhattan, Rather and I, getting B-roll. And Rather says to me, he says, "I know you're right about Afghanistan, because I've been going there for 30 years and I know you're right." Right. And then this message comes from Central Command, and nowhere to be seen. And first, I can tell you, Jared, we could be here. I'm sorry, I keep calling Jared Jordan. I'm sorry about that. I apologize.
Jared's my brother. It's fine.
We can be here all day. I could just tell you stories like that, as well as stories about working with members of Congress who, folks on the Armed Services Committee, Senate Armed Services Committee, House Armed Services Committee, who, very clearly did not want to stick their neck out on behalf of the troops that they claim to support and love so much, let alone on behalf of what's best for the American people, or stopping an atrocity like, the Iraq War, the Yemen War, the Syrian War, the Afghan War, what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So basically, we support the troops if they're muzzled, and just wave the flag.
As long as it's politically best for us.
Right.
And I can tell you a story. I think it gets the point clear. Is in November 2009, the late John Murtha, former Democrat from Pennsylvania, brings me into the basement of the Capitol building, in one of the big conference rooms in the basement. And Murtha has me speak to the entire House Democratic caucus. There must have been probably 200 of them sitting there on folding chairs. They'd all made themselves sandwiches, very odd thing to experience for someone kind of coming into that environment like I was. And, I make my piece about the Afghan war, the Afghan escalation. Murtha says the same thing. It's just like Vietnam. It's just like Iraq. The Democratic caucus gets upset, and they have microphones, and there must have been 6 or 7 or 8 members stacked behind each of the microphones wanting to say the same thing. We can't let Obama do what Bush did. We can't let Obama do what Johnson did. That kind of thing. Goes on for, 15, 20 minutes. Speaker Pelosi pops up out of the middle of the crowd. And Speaker Pelosi says, and what had happened the week before, an important part of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare, the ACA, had been passed. I can't remember what it was, but the House had passed a very integral part of the thing. And Speaker Pelosi said, look, remember, the ACA is President Obama's domestic priority. That means it's our priority. We cannot go against him on the war at this point. We can't put him in a corner. We have to do everything we can to ensure his priorities are filled. And with that, they all sat back down. And there was no real, there was never really any effort by the U.S. Congress. There are some voice votes passed and some other things over the years to get out of Afghanistan, but certainly nothing ever happened again because it wasn't in the interest of the White House for it to occur. And so it didn't occur. And so that's the reality of it. You see that all the time. I mean, and again, for a story like that, I can tell you 6, 7, 8 different stories. Ike Skelton, Jack Reed, Adam Smith, stories involving all those types of people, more or less saying one thing and then doing another.
So let me ask you about, if you win, which we'll get to your chances. I know you're for universal health care, strong on getting money out of politics, and a no compromise Green New Deal, which I wanted to ask you about. So tell me, because, frankly, a lot of people don't know, the Green New Deal did not start with AOC. It started with the Green Party. So can you kind of talk to me about, some of your top policy priorities if you were to get in there?
Well, I really, if you look at my campaign website, which is MatthewHoh4Senate.org, and the first thing on my platform page is, democratic reform, democratic strengthening, democratic expansion. I think as you mentioning the money in politics, as well as several other things we have to do, whether it be abolishing the filibuster and abolishing the electoral college or moving towards ranked choice voting or proportional representation, a host of other things we have to accomplish, because with the current political structure, the current political system, the way it's so captured by money, all these other things that we need that are existential for us, whether it's a threat of nuclear war, whether it's climate crisis, whether it's an economic bill of rights for people, without fundamentally redoing, if you want to call it breaking the political system, non-violently, but breaking the political system and rebuilding it, reimagining it, rebuilding it so that it serves the will of the people, it meets the needs of the people, and respects human rights. I don't think we have a chance unless we do that with the current system. Again, break it, rebuild it, reimagine it, have it structured so it supports people. So that's the first priority. Climate crisis is a close to, and these priorities, of course, are, I guess however you want to, wherever you're coming from is going to be your perspective on it, right? What would be number one, number two? The unfortunate reality, man, is that we got to do all of this. The reality is we have to do all of it. We don't have the luxury to say, well, universal health care, but we're not going to do debt cancellation. We're not going to do something about wages. We're not going to do something about housing. Unless we do it all together, and it all ties together, I believe, as well, with the climate crisis, which is existential. It's incredibly urgent. We are seeing the results of inaction for the last several decades. I'm old enough to remember Dan Quayle talking about climate change, global warming, in the vice presidential debates. I can remember that, so this has been around for quite a while, and we've chosen to do nothing. And, I'm Generation X, but the children in my family, like the kids in my neighborhood here, they will be cursing and damning this generation before we die because of our inaction. So the climate crisis is that existential, and in order to deal with it, you need massive government effort. And so when we talk about like a no compromise Green New Deal, and as you mentioned, this goes back to what the Green Party starts speaking about at least a dozen years ago. And this idea of investing trillions of dollars to rebuild the entire U.S. economy, restructure our infrastructure, whether that be physical or social, because as people, I think, understand with the coming climate crisis. Look, I was just in Elizabeth City, which is a port town here in North Carolina, and talking to a journalist there a week or so ago, and he told me what their plan is for climate change, as they understand what's going to happen. And they're 12 feet above sea level, so they've got a little bit of cushion, but they still see what's coming. That they're going to have to pick up and move their entire downtown. How do you do that? The instability that climate crisis would cause, and I'm not talking about the wildfires, the droughts, the floods, and the famine, and the hundreds of millions of migrants, and everything else that's going to occur. But there's also this other piece of the fundamental disruption of our economic and social structures. How are you going to pick up and move the downtowns of how many different cities and towns in the United States? I mean, the disruption that will occur to local economies and to families. And if you do not have some type of societal structure to support those people, and in particular, going back now to the Economic Bill of Rights, which is so fundamental, I believe, to a Green New Deal, no compromise Green New Deal. And when we say no compromise Green New Deal, we are talking about, not this corporate greenwashing that you hear from the Democrats, where, well, what's going to happen is that the same corporations that got us into this mess are going to be the ones who are going to build these carbon capture machines, which is complete science fiction. But they're going to build these carbon capture machines, and they're very similar to the Adam McKay, David Sirota film, Don't Look Up. The comet is going to provide jobs, right? So this idea that climate change, climate crisis is going to provide jobs, and that, they're lining up at the trough for that. And, but the idea of tying into that Green New Deal, this Economic Bill of Rights that is so necessary to support, it's necessary now. I mean, people are living with these existential, and I don't use that word lightly. I know you already used it 2 or 3 times, right? But they're living with these their own personal crises that are a result of, their healthcare is decided by how much money they have in their checking account at the end of the month. People in my neighborhood, I can point to a house right there where the people had to move because the rent went up. And now she and her kids live farther away. They already lived far away from work. Now they live even farther away from work. Things are more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. It just keeps adding up. And the weight on people in North Carolina, we just were told last week that 40% increase in overdose deaths. So the destruction that is coming upon our communities now. But then when you look at, oh my God, the climate crisis, what will it do? If we don't prepare ourselves structurally for that, I don't know what it will actually look like. And it will just like, I think the climate crisis, you have this idea of with climate, right? You have a positive feedback, right? So the warmer it gets, the wetter it gets, the wetter it gets, the warmer it gets, on and on and on. Well, I think that same type of rapid devolution, that a cycle of reinforcement will continue societally, right? As costs go up, despair goes up, on and on and on.
And finally, I mean, let's keep it real. It's a Herculean task for Green Party candidates, even locally. There's been some success, but not so much nationally. Tell me about the obstacles running as a Green Party candidate, and what do you think your realistic chances are of competing in the Senate race?
Well, we have to get on the ballot, which is the first hurdle. And I've come to learn a lot about ballot access. And ballot access just may be one of the most important, if not the most important thing keeping the two-party system in position, in power. If you keep people off the ballot, which of course is a form of voter suppression, you maintain your two-party system, right? I mean, very similar to like I just was at a candidate forum last night, listened to some local candidates and a lot of talk about workers and unions, and this, the understanding that, look, a worker's power is in their ability to strike. Their leverage is in their ability to strike. That's much like voters are. Their power is in casting their votes or not casting their votes. So if you limit them, and if you then, force them to participate in the lesser of two evils system, then, you're going to keep that system. So this ballot access is incredibly important to maintain that two-party privileged position. And so, what you see with the ballot access, it's so surprising to me as I'm experiencing it and doing and being part of this right now, is how costly it is. I mean, the idea that you have to collect tens of thousands of signatures to get on the ballot, it's incredibly costly, let alone filing costs and everything else. But, the idea that you have to have, for our case, we have to collect roughly about 18 or 19,000 total signatures, raw signatures that then go through a verification process. And so that's how you get to your number. And when you look at that, when you understand that a volunteer on a good day will get you between 10 and 15 signatures an hour on a good day. You do the math, right? You divide 19,000 by 10. Okay. And you start to realize how many person hours, how many men and women you need to accomplish this. And then you look at the time frame that you have, you know, and you start to understand, as I now understand, whenever I talk to anyone now about this, they all say, oh, of course you pay for petitioners. Of course you pay to get your signatures. That's how everyone does it. Right? And what you've seen actually, which is new to me, is this petitioning industry that, you know, is a subset of the two-party system, because what you have, particularly say in states like California, where they have a lot of, say, ballot referendums, you have an industry that exists because there are tens of millions of dollars available to pay petitioning firms and petitioners. You hear stories of people making $1,000 a day collecting signatures, right? Because, you know, the Democrats or Republicans or some other special interest group will put 10, 15, $20 million into a ballot referendum campaign. No problem. So right. The problem is that creates that market, right? So when we then say, okay, we have volunteers, but we don't have the organization to have the hundreds of volunteers that we need committed weekly for 3 or 4 hours a piece every week, because in order to do that, you have to be an organization that already has a lot of money behind it. So when you turn to the paid petitioning firms, what you see is that, okay, well, at a minimum, it's going to cost you $5 a signature, $6 a signature, $7 a signature. And now you're saying, well, I need to get 5,000 signatures. I need at least $25,000, right? I mean, I know I went into a lot of detail there, probably more than people were expecting or hoping, but hopefully it kind of gives an idea just on that one aspect of ballot access, why it's so hard for third parties, independents, Greens, whoever, to get on the ballot. It's difficult, and that's purposeful. They do it, you know, in order, again, to maintain the system that they have. So it's a hurdle. We've got a great group of people. We've got, we're raising money. If people can support us, of course, please do so. Again, MatthewHoh4Senate.org. And then the idea, we get on the ballot, and the next thing is getting into the debates. Another aspect of ballot access, right, is every state's different. Here in North Carolina, it's as crooked as anywhere else, the way the debates work. They don't want the third parties or independents in. Again, another form of ballot access. And so that will be the next thing that we take on after getting on the ballot, is getting on the debate, so that come time for the debates in September, there is someone standing up there arguing against that $813 billion Pentagon budget, arguing for universal health care, arguing for annually adjusted livable wage, arguing for rent control. I mean, you say rent control down here, man, and people just, they crap their pants. You know, it's like, but rent control, I don't know any other way you're going to accomplish getting these housing costs under control in a way that's fair and just for working families. I mean, here in North Carolina, rents have gone up 20% in the last year. Houses have gone up 25% in the last year. And that's right, on top of inflation from before that. So, you know, I mean, if you want somebody like that in the debates, then we got to get on the ballot, or do that. We need the money, so on and so on and so on. So, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time. I'll definitely keep in touch with you.
Yeah, please.
I'd love to hear about any shenanigans you're dealing with, so we could report that. But good luck to you down in North Carolina, and thank you for your service as well.
Hey, well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you do, highlighting people like me. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, and that's MatthewHoh4Senate.org.
MatthewHoh4Senate.org. Yes, thank you.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.